Everyone. My name is Lily Lopez McGee. I am here representing the Pickering Fellowship program, and I'm here with Cynthia Valentine from the Payne program and Patricia Scroggs from the Rangel program. We will do a little bit more in-depth introductions as it's our turn to speak, but I am going to pass over the mic to Cynthia, who will start us off with the Payne program.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As Lily mentioned, my name is Cynthia Valentine, and I am the program manager to the Payne Fellowship program. So essentially what I'm going to do today is just give you guys a brief overview of the program, list what some of the elements are in terms of our program requirements, as well as the eligibility requirements and what some of our selection committee looks for when it comes to what a competitive application looks like. So let's begin. So in terms of the Payne program, we do prepare individuals who are interested in a career track doing international development with USID's Foreign Service. The whole premise of the program is to diversify the Foreign Service as well as provide financial need to applicants who need it in terms of their graduate programs. The actual award type we provide is up to $96,000 towards a 2-year master's program. This broken down would be $44,000, which would go towards the irrespective graduate program of the students. We also give our fellows a $16,000 stipend that they would receive annually, which should help offset their living costs as well as their books fees, etc. And we also provide up to $10,000 towards their summer internships. So in terms of the actual graduate program the fellows should be looking for, again, it does have to be a 2-year program. It should be at a U.S. institution, and it should be in any relevant field to the Foreign Service, which could include public health, international education, global human development, environmental science, urban planning, economics, political science, and etc. So when it gets down to the timeline, once our fellows are awarded the fellowship program, we will invite them that summer before they start their graduate program to participate in a 1-week orientation at Howard University. During the orientation, we'll do an introduction to USID's Foreign Service, where they'll participate in various professional development activities. We'll assign them a senior Foreign Service officer to serve as their mentor, and we'll conduct various meetings with various USID officials as well as backstop coordinators to discuss the various career tracks within USID's Foreign Service. Once the fellows complete the orientation, they'll then embark on their 10-week internship on the Hill. Once that is completed, they'll then start their first year within their graduate program. That following summer, the fellows will participate in a 10-week internship at an overseas mission at a USAID mission abroad. And that following year, they'll then complete their second year within their irrespective graduate program. And then that following summer be sworn in within USID's Foreign Service. After they are sworn in, the fellows usually do participate in a 12-month to 18-month rotational period here in DC, where they will do various backstop and language trainings before they are set to serve overseas at one of the various USID missions. It is a 5-year service obligation, but it is truly a rewarding career track for those who want to move forward with this fellowship program. In terms of the selection process and timeline, our application, we do like to have the transcripts, a personal statement, financial needs statement, 2 letters of recommendation, one from a faculty member and another from a community leader, as well as the applicant should list any extracurricular activities, community service, internship experience that they've held that are relevant to the Foreign Service, and being able also to highlight their leadership role within those experiences. Applicants do have to be U.S. citizens. We also ask for a cumulative GPA of 3.2 by the time of the application deadline. And while they are applying to this fellowship, they should also be seeking enrollment at a 2-year graduate program. I also listed the schedule in terms of when our application deadline is, which is December 21st of 2018. We plan to select 17 finalists by January 25th, and that by February 25th to the 28th, we will be conducting our interviews in Washington, D.C. The applicants will be notified of the final decisions by March 1st, and we will need to hear their final response of whether or not they accept the fellowship by March 4th. And I can pass it off to, I think, Patricia Scroggs, who's the program director to the Rangel Fellowship.
Hi, everybody. My name is Patricia Scroggs, and I'm the director of the Charles B. Rangel International Affairs Program. I love going after Cynthia because I can say, yeah, we do a lot of the same things and can kind of focus on some different things. So the Rangel and the Payne are very similar to one another. The big difference is the Rangel program, people will go into the State Department Foreign Service, whereas for the Payne program, they go into the USAID Foreign Service. There are some differences. So as State Department Foreign Service officers, while we each have a career track, we are considered generalists. That means that we do a variety of different things in different tours. So while, let's say, I was an economic officer, so I spent a lot of my time working on economics, but I also did a variety of other things. I worked on human rights, I did some work in consular affairs, I did some work on things like trafficking in persons, looking over our financial aid budget for Europe, things like that. USAID, you have a backstop, and it's often a little bit more technical. So maybe you're a health officer, or maybe you're an environmental officer. In the State Department Foreign Service, you could definitely have an environmental tour, you could have a tour working on health issues, but we're not quite so specialized. Also, State Department tends to focus a little bit more on policy, the foreign policy, where USAID does more in terms of foreign assistance, and again, long-term development assistance too. Both of them are great careers. So with that background, let me go back and tell you a little bit about what the Rangel Fellowship is. Oh, actually, I want to tell you two more things before I go on, because I like to explain. So I was a Foreign Service officer, and what I like about the Foreign Service for State Department. For me, the most important thing is that I feel like what we do makes a difference. That whether we're, trying to work on conflict resolution, whether or not we are helping an American citizen who's in crisis, trying to help families of missing in action from wars to, get some closure. We do a lot of different things, and I find that to be really rewarding. The second aspect I like is that every job we do is very different from every other job. So intellectually, it stays really interesting. And if any of you are intellectually restless, you almost can't decide what you want to do because you want to do so many things, the Foreign Service of any type is a really great career. So let me get back to the fellowship itself. So it's very similar in many ways to the Payne Fellowship. We give up to $95,000 over 2 years, and that's for your tuition, living expenses. In addition, some graduate programs provide supplemental financial assistance. So let me go into a little bit more detail here. So for $95,000, that includes $21,500 every year given to your school. We give you a stipend of $16,000 every year to cover your expenses. And then your internships, both on Capitol Hill and overseas at a U.S. embassy, worth about $10,000. So suddenly $95,000 doesn't sound like quite as much money, particularly when you look at tuition. So $21,500 per year for tuition. There are many schools that are much more expensive than that. Because of that, we have partnerships with many other schools, particularly the APSIA schools, although we have some others, that provide additional financial assistance to any Rangel whom they accept. If you'd like to know more about it, you can look at our website, or you can email us and we'll give you a listing of the current offers. So that's a wonderful benefit. Our goal is for you to get out of graduate school with as little debt as possible and with a job waiting for you. We do an orientation, we do internships on Capitol Hill, an overseas internship the second summer. You have a mentor, or actually in the case of the Rangel program, we have two. So we have one more senior mentor and one that we call a sponsor, which is usually alumni who's maybe 4 or 5 years into the Foreign Service career, just to make sure you get lots of perspective and lots of support as you go forward in looking at a career in foreign service. Now, the most important thing about the program, the biggest benefit, is the fact that you get employment in the State Department Foreign Service when you complete the program. So if you get the fellowship, you get the job. And so it's really important that you want to join the State Department Foreign Service, because if you don't, it doesn't make a lot of sense. If you do, it's a really wonderful way in. Now, actually, before I get to this, there's only one reason you would not get in, and that one's kind of important. You have to be able to get clearances. So you have to be able to get a medical, a security, and a suitability clearance in order to get in. Again, generally that's not a problem. However, and medical just means that we work all over the world. Sometimes we work in difficult situations where you don't have immediate access to first-class medical. It's not that there can't be anything wrong, but it has to be well controlled. But I want to spend a moment on security clearances right before we get there. Security clearances and suitability clearances. You actually have to be trusted, of course, with information, but you also represent the United States, and that's a really big honor. But if you, let's say, do something on or off duty, you reflect upon the American people. So if you have an extra drink one night while you're out, and someone runs out and you hit them by mistake, and it wasn't your fault, but the newspaper the next day is going to say, you know, American official endangers the life of local community. So you reflect on something that's much larger. So how you act on and off duty is very important to us. For young people, the most common reason why they do not get security clearances or suitability has to do with use of illegal drugs. And it doesn't matter, again, it is a federal crime. It doesn't matter if your state allows it, it is still a federal crime. So at a minimum, a year, 18 months. I mean, again, I can't give you an exact deadline because it would depend on what you did and how often you did it. But there has to be a significant amount of time before, between when you last used and when you're applying for a security clearance. Financial irresponsibility, which is not debt. A lot of people have debt. Financial irresponsibility would be a pattern of moving from credit card to credit card, defaulting on student loans. So it is a pattern. It's not forgetting to pay your phone bill 1 month. And also academic integrity. So any type of academic dishonesty, cheating, stuff like that can be problematic. So that's just a couple of ideas, because the worst thing would be if you got the fellowship, you know, it got announced in the paper, your grandmother knew about it, and then you lost it because of something such as that. It is not generally anything that has to do with the fact you've traveled or that you have foreign relatives. Generally, it's something that you've done. Again, we don't get to make the decisions. It is diplomatic security. So with that background, let me tell you a little bit about the process for this year. September 17th is the application deadline. You will know that we then get together, they look at all the applications, and the selection panel will pick 60 finalists on October 17th. We're going to interview this year in Washington, November 7th and 8th, and we will let you know whether or not you have it by November 9th. So November 7th and 8th are interviews. November 9th is the decision. We'll be giving out 30 fellowships this year, and then you have 4 days to make a decision on whether or not you want to accept. Our eligibility requirements, very similar to those of the Payne program. You have to be a U.S. citizen, have a GPA of at least 3.2, and be planning to enroll in a graduate program in fall 2019 in an area of relevance to the Foreign Service. So like Payne, has to be a 2-year program, has to be at a U.S.-based university, and it has to be in an area of relevance. So a master's in public policy, master's in international affairs, conflict resolution, business administration, public administration, those are all fine. Sports medicine, not fine, just to give you some idea. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lily Lopez-McGee with the Pickering program, and we will all be here to answer your questions afterwards.
Excellent. Good afternoon. So I am wrapping up essentially the trifecta of the Diplomacy and Development Award, Graduate Fellowship Awards based here at Howard University. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about it. I won't go into depth in regard to the Foreign Service. I think Patricia did a really great job of outlining the work that our fellows go on to do. So I did want to talk to you a little bit about the Pickering Foreign Affairs program. The Graduate Fellowship program is structured in a very similar way to both the Payne and the Rangel programs. It is a graduate award that provides funding to those who are seeking enrollment in a 2-year master's program about a year in advance. So the one big distinction that I want to make this year is that in previous years, our application deadline has been closer to January. This year, our application deadline is in September 20th, and I'll get into the application details in a moment, but I did want to mention that early on because the application is live and open now, as is Rangel's. So if you are interested in these, you should definitely make your way to our websites immediately. So similar to the Rangel program, the Pickering program provides funding in support of tuition and mandatory fees of $21,500 and a personal living stipend for $16,000 per year towards your master's program for a total of $37,500 per year. We also do a week-long orientation to the Department of State for our fellows and 2 internships. Now, the big distinguishing factor between the Rangel and the Pickering programs falls with the internships, both in terms of the timing and the focus. So the Pickering program has a domestic internship as well, but that internship takes place in between the first and second year of graduate studies. So our Pickering Fellows do an internship at the Department of State here in Washington, D.C. in a bureau that's closely aligned with their regional or functional interests. We work with them during that first year of their graduate program to place them in a 10-week internship during that summer between their first and second year of graduate studies. The overseas internship component takes place after our fellows graduate from their 2-year master's program, and then they enter A100 as a Foreign Service Officer that fall. So for this year's timeline, our fellows will graduate in 2021 and enter the Foreign Service in the fall of 2021. The funding is very similar to both Rangel and Payne. We provide up to $10,000 in travel, stipend, and housing costs for both of those internships. And our fellows are also paired with mentors. The mentorship pairing does happen upon entering the orientation, so our fellows will get paired with senior Foreign Service Officer mentors so that they really can start going in and looking at the types of internship opportunities they want to pursue, the career tracks that they're interested in, and that kind of thing. And ultimately, after the program, our fellows go into the State Department Foreign Service Officer, where they will, pending all obligations that Patricia went through, the security clearances, medical clearances, and suitability clearances, as well as passing the Foreign Service oral assessment exam, will enter as a Foreign Service Officer. The timeline I mentioned a little bit briefly. Our application is open now. It will close on September 20th. And in late October, we will select 60 finalists who we will fly out to do an in-person interview on the 15th and the 16th. Those dates are just one day off. And our 30 selected fellows will know on November 16th whether or not they have been admitted to the program. Just a couple of notes about the process for the interviews. We will, like I mentioned, fly folks out to do a one-day-long in-depth interview, where they will interview with a panel of 3 selection committee members and engage in a writing exercise. So the interview process is pretty intense. It's also part of the process of onboarding them. So as soon as our finalists are in Washington, D.C., we start processing paperwork. They go through fingerprints, really starting that clearance process. In addition to the timeline, just a little bit of background about the application requirements. We require all of the same information that Rangel requires: an academic background, personal statement, a financial needs statement, financial information from your student aid report generated by FAFSA, as well as 2 letters of recommendation, one from a faculty or instructor member and one from a member of the community. Eligibility is the same: U.S. citizenship, 3.2 GPA, and looking to enroll in a 2-year master's program at a U.S. institution in the fall of 2019. So that's a little bit about the programs. We did want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about some tips that we've learned over the years of what makes for a competitive fellowship application. And we decided to do this as one slide at the end because very many of the things that Rangel and Pickering and Payne consider competitive are uniform across the board. So we might tag team these. One of the first things is make sure that you're eligible for the program. The eligibility requirements are pretty clear. There are really only 3 of them. 3.2 GPA, U.S. citizen, and looking to enter to graduate school next fall. If you are already a graduate student, unfortunately, you are not eligible to apply. If you are in the process of becoming a naturalized citizen, but you won't receive your citizenship until next year, for example, you are not eligible to apply until you have your citizenship in hand. So just make sure that you're going through and ensuring that you're meeting the eligibility requirements for the application. Talk about the personal
and also, again, when we look at requirements, also look at the difference between the 2 programs or the 3 programs.
Yes.
Again, if you're going to say USAID and it's one of the State Department programs, that doesn't look good. If you're looking at getting a PhD, that's not what we cover. And so you want to make sure that when you're writing what your interests are, they really do match the program. I think the next thing is writing a good statement of interest. And I always say the statement of interest should explain 3 things. The first one is, why do I want to be a Foreign Service Officer in any of these programs? The second one is, what do I bring? And so that's your background, preparations. And the third one is, who am I? And that's because it's a personal statement. And in how you tell your motivations and what you're bringing, we should get some insight into who you are. It should be personal, so it doesn't sound generic. So we should get a sense of, what you value, what you bring, maybe what your background is. Have you overcome any obstacles in your life? If you look on our website, there's something that's called Tips for Preparing a Competitive Application. If you look in there, it will give you some ideas of some of what they are looking for in the statement of interest. But again, if you can look at it and say, wow, I really have answered well. Why do I want to be a Foreign Service Officer? Why am I qualified, or what do I bring? And a little bit of, who am I? What do I value? I would say that's very useful.
And for us, just to kind of piggyback off of what Patricia mentioned earlier, since the USAID Foreign Service Officers are more specialized, one of the biggest components that applicants should do is research on USAID, what the mission is, as well as what backstops that they're interested in going to. That's one of the things our panel members do want to look at, is to see that the applicant has done the necessary research and they are able to connect the dots with their previous work experience and how they were able to evolve professionally in terms of why they're interested in this career track within the Foreign Service. So those are one of the main or the largest component in that. And also getting good letters of recommendations. Sometimes we would see applicants that try to go for the big name person, but we could tell that the person may not necessarily know them in depthly. Our selection committee really do take the time to read each letter of recommendation, so try to have the applicants be able to identify people who are able to really speak on their abilities, their analytic skills, and who they are and why they would make a good Foreign Service officer.
Good. Financial assistance.
So all 3 of these programs are really looking to provide funding for folks who may not otherwise have access to graduate studies. Graduate school is expensive. So one of the areas that our selection committees look at is financial need. Financial need is broadly defined. We ask for lots of information related to your financial situation, both from your undergraduate experience as well as your current financial situation. So you'll notice that in our application requirements for all 3 of the programs, we ask for your current student aid report. And some of you might think, oh, well, I've been out of school for several years. I don't have, I'll submit the one from the year, for my senior year. That's not what we're looking for. We are looking for the student aid report from this year using the most current tax information, because that does give us a better idea of your current financial need in looking to go to graduate school. That is one component of financial need. The other component, again, is from your undergraduate degree. So if you are a current student, we always encourage folks to keep track of the documents that you receive from your schools. So any financial aid that you've received, any scholarships, awards, keep documentation for that, because we will ask for that in the application materials. If you've been out for a couple of years, don't have access to that, it's not required that you have that in there, but it does help our committee get a better understanding for what your financial need was as a student. In addition to that, we will also ask quite a bit of information about you and your parents' financial status. And we do require that. That's in part to give us a full picture of, again, your financial need. The one thing that I'll mention here is that we include a financial needs statement, 400 words, which is quite a bit of space, actually, to describe your situation. So if you believe that the numbers altogether might not paint the picture, an accurate picture of what your financial need is, that's what that statement is for. Clearly tell us why it is that you would need this support at this particular time to pursue graduate studies, and how this will contribute to your advancing your careers. So, yes.
Okay, good. The next thing is to include all relevant extracurricular, community, or volunteer experiences and highlight any leadership roles. The Foreign Service is inherently about service, so we are very interested in people that have true commitment to helping others. And so whatever you do, it could be on your college campus, it could be in your community, it could be through your church, it could be through your synagogue, through, you know, whatever you have, highlight it. Also, if leadership roles, that doesn't only mean president or vice president. So maybe you're the one who coordinated the spring fundraising, or administered the selection process, or I don't know, whatever it is. Think of good, strong action verbs that help us understand what you did that contributed to the organization, because that's important.
And the final points would also be listing all relevant college and university and professional honors and awards, as well as proofreading all aspects of the application carefully, and making sure that all the application material is submitted on time. One of the biggest things that, in terms of knocking applicants out, in terms of being able to apply, is not ensuring that all their letters of recommendations are submitted on time. So just taking the necessary steps to follow up with your recommenders to make sure that they are submitting their letters of recommendation to us in time of the application deadline, and just making sure all your necessary supplemental documents are in to the program.
Yeah, I mean, you're Patricia, again, you really are competing at a very high level, and so you want everything to be good. I don't know how often I've seen someone who has done everything and then just didn't proofread well, and so I remember one year somebody misspelled their name, and our system puts it all over the application. It was a nice application, but it was like this one typo was screaming, I have no attention to detail. I have no attention to detail. And you don't want that. If you're tired of looking at it, somebody look over it, but you want the whole thing to be as good as possible.
Yes, and on that note, I would just say you should not be the only one looking at your statements, of your personal statement or your financial needs statement. Someone should definitely be looking at it to help you with it, because we all get reader's fatigue. We get used to reading our own story and imagine words that may not be there. So that is the content of what we had planned for today's webinar. We're happy to take questions. Logistically, we have the chat box on the right-hand side. Please feel free to type in your questions, and we'll give you a moment, because I know that it take a minute just to type in those long questions. So, and we do see someone typing, so we'll give you a few moments.
How many applications does each program receive?
So the applications vary from year to year. Last year, we averaged about 350 applications that we're reviewing in total.
Right, but we ended up getting about 550 applications in total. Of that, in terms of, you know, not all are eligible, not all completed. So you're right, we had about 350 that went to panel. This is, you know, talking about Rangel, and it would be similar for Pickering.
So for the Payne Fellowship, we had around 400 applications, but when it came to eligibility and all necessary documents being in, We had around 150 applications that went to panel.
And just again for context, the Rangel and the Pickering admit 3 fellows, and the Payne admits 10.
But your statistic does show, as do ours, that it's really important to take, to finish your application and make sure the number of people who put so much work into it and either don't finish it or don't, or they're not eligible. We always hate to see that. So we want you to finish and have the selection panel look at your application.
And as we're waiting for other questions to come in from folks, I'll read our moderator, thank you, Carmen, her question. What advice can our advisors give students if they're trying to decide between applying for Pickering, Rangel, or Payne?
Yes, do it. You can apply to all of them. Honestly, the Rangel and Pickering are only a couple days apart. The applications are very similar now. And so if you're going to apply to one, honestly, it makes sense to apply to the other, I think. Unless for some reason you really do not want to work in Congress, at which point you shouldn't apply to Rangel. Or if you really don't want to work at the State Department and domestic, but then you really shouldn't apply for the entire thing. So it would make sense. Now, Payne is a little bit later. You would know beforehand. But I would think if you're interested in international development, you want to take it?
Definitely. And historically, we have received a lot of the same applicants who do apply to all 3 programs. But one of the things I do want to point out is if an applicant is applying to the Rangel, make sure that there's clear distinction that this is development work. There have been cases where we've even seen applicants write Rangel on their Payne application. So I guess that kind of comes into play in proofreading, and just make sure that the application is tailored towards development work and USAID work and that overall redoing in which career track and backstop you're interested in going to.
One question we've gotten is, could you, if you apply to both Rangel and Pickering, could you be selected as a finalist for each? Yes, even though it's only a week apart, yeah, you could be selected as a finalist for each. Because the Rangel interviews are a week before, we will make Rangel offers before the Pickering interviews. So, you have the choice of either accepting Rangel. If you accept Rangel, you will be withdrawn from the Pickering because we want to have as many people have an opportunity as possible. They both go into the Foreign Service. They're both wonderful opportunities. If you decide you do want to continue on to the Pickering, even if you've gotten the Rangel, we'll thank you and give your spot to somebody else. So you do have to make a decision. But luckily, these are wonderful options. So let's say you are a finalist for Rangel and you don't quite make it. You get to interview the next week for Pickering.
One of the things that we've had folks ask us about is the timeline. So the timeline is quite a bit early for both Rangel and Pickering, and part of that is to accommodate security clearances. But we've realized in the last 2 years of running Rangel that it actually benefits the fellows to a great extent, because they go into their graduate schools with funding already behind them. And essentially, graduate schools are looking at our fellows as sort of pre-vetted candidates, people who have gone through a rigorous selection panel, who are clearly great and excellent candidates for their graduate program. So they will be vying for our fellows, and oftentimes our finalists as well. So if you're selected as a finalist but may not get the fellowship, you may end up finding yourself in a position to apply to some of our partner institutions who are really looking for quality applicants. And by making it to the finalist round, you've proven that a little bit. So the timeline, while short, ends up working in your benefit. It also gives folks who want to really want to be part of these programs the opportunity to decide whether or not to continue on with their graduate application or come back and try again next year. And we do have people who do that. So if that happens, please feel free to come back and apply again.
And the Rangel and the Pickering selection panels are completely separate. So don't worry about, my application looks the same. Is that going to look bad? No, nobody will know the difference because, again, they're completely separate panels. So how does a student prepare for the interview process?
It is a great question. So I mentioned this briefly, and I'll let Cynthia talk about how the Payne interview is a little bit different. For both the Pickering and the Rangel programs, the interview, again, is a day-long interview. There is a panel interview where you will have 3 panelists who will ask you questions about your motivations for applying to the program, what your interest is in the Foreign Service, and ask you a series of hypothetical questions. What we found is that applicants who practice in advance, who maybe sit down with their career advisors or connect with the diplomats and residents that are in their region to practice interviews, are often the most successful, in part because you get your jitters out of the way. You have some answers already kind of in your back pocket ready to go to that nerve-wracking question, why are you applying to this program? What is your motivation to be a Foreign Service officer? So practicing is really important, and practice is really important for the writing exercise as well. It is a timed writing exercise. You'll have an hour, and you'll get to select from a series of prompts, I think seven prompts that are very similar to the types of prompts that you might see in a GRE exam. So what we often suggest to finalists is to go to the GRE website, take a couple of prompts, and practice responding to them. Time yourself. Sit in the room and just type away. Only have a Word document open and figure out the timing that you need to outline, to then write, and then proofread at the end. Because often the timing is where people get tripped up in the writing exercise.
Yeah, I would also point out that if you're selected as a finalist, we actually do a specific presentation that we do for finalists so that they know exactly what to expect from the entire day, because they have one day, and we will really go through the entire thing. We'll talk about the types of questions. Certainly we don't tell you the exact questions, but we'll talk about the type of questions. Our goal is for people to come in and feel comfortable about the interview and be able to show their best. What else do I want to tell you about that? So again, we try to be very transparent in what we're looking for in terms of the interview.
And for the Payne Fellowship, it's also similar to the Rangel in that we do provide a webinar to our finalists just to give them a rundown of how the day will look. In terms of the actual selection or interview day, we do have our participants participate in a writing exercise, as well as a group dynamic exercise, and then interviewing with 3 panel members. One of the benefits to the interview process is that the selection committee is the same as the ones who are reviewing the application. So it's good in terms of the selection committee already has an idea of who the applicants are and their background stories. So usually kind of brings or calms down the nerves of the finalists who are interviewing today. One of the advice that I do usually give the finalists is to, as Lily mentioned, practice on time writing. I also advise them to just read up on various current event issues. A lot of the writing prompts aren't necessarily determined on what the right answer is, but it's basically how you're able to craft your argument and be able to defend it with evidence. So we do try to give a variety of different questions where everyone can feel comfortable in finding a question that they will be able to answer.
Okay, Patricia mentioned that students who are intellectually restless should apply. What other characteristics should advisors look for in students before they recommend these programs? Certainly people that are interested in the Foreign Service, international affairs, people that are in spending time overseas, because you can end up with 2/3 of your career overseas. That would also be very important. Certainly, our programs do reach out to those who are diverse. So we welcome the applications of members of minority groups historically underrepresented in the Foreign Service, those with financial need, and women. That said, we are open to anybody who meets the eligibility requirements. The socioeconomics is important because we do get points for that. So that's another thing to think about. But students that are generally very interested in the Foreign Service would be good applicants for the program.
The one thing, the question that we often get about the international component of background experience is, do I need to have gone abroad in order to be eligible for these programs? No, you don't. There are different ways that you can be interculturally competent and and have had opportunities with diverse and international communities here within the United States. But again, it is very much the tie to the Foreign Service, that you've done your research. So even if you haven't had the opportunity to go overseas, you at least know what you're getting into in a career with the Foreign Service, because you will be traveling overseas and working in and around the world.
With that career aspect in mind, we are asking students to decide now about their career trajectory for the next 7 to 9+ years. What advice do you have for advisors and their students about taking that long-range decision? What factors should they weigh? Does anybody want to start on this one? Okay. You want to go? Do you want me to?
You can go and I'll piggyback.
Okay, so what I would say is this is something that you need to think through, because it is a 5-year service obligation. Then you have 2 years in the program. So you should spend some time on the career website. Understand what the Foreign Service career is. Again, the first 5 years, at least 4 of them, you will probably be overseas. Not always, but usually. You will be asked to do some things that are very difficult. We are worldwide available, and certainly while we are interested in the preferences of people, you could be sent anywhere. And so we would ask advisors to make sure their students have really thought through the implications. While there are wonderful benefits, great travel, really interesting work that matters, there are times you're going to miss a family wedding. There are times you are away from home. And so I think it's very important that you think that through. Before coming out, because the worst is if we have somebody that comes in and says, oh wow, I didn't realize that, or in the end I really am not comfortable with the idea of working overseas or working in a place that perhaps doesn't have all of the amenities of the United States. Does anybody else want to suggest something?
Sure, especially when it comes to the Payne Fellowship, same as to the Rangel Fellowship, it is a 5-year commitment. But it's also where the missions are located. It being development work, you will be working in developmental countries and areas. Also, the missions or the duration of the missions are typically longer than they would be if you were within Department of State's Foreign Service Office, or as a Foreign Service officer with Department of State. So again, being in the Foreign Service is a lifestyle. And applicants who are looking to join such fellowship programs as the Payne, Rangel, and Pickering should be interested in doing the Foreign Service and know that this is a career track that they're interested in.
And in that vein, I think it's helpful to talk about work experience before going into the programs. Generally speaking, for the Rangel and the Pickering programs, our cohorts are typically about a third that come straight from undergrad, but most people come in with some work experience, whether it's a year, 5 years, or a couple years out from their undergraduate degree. And I think that is attributed in part, their success is attributed in part because they know they've gotten some work experience, they've gotten practice going overseas. Many of them come with Fulbright or Peace Corps experience and know what it's like to live overseas. So for those of you who are advising, especially undergraduate students in these programs, we often suggest that getting at least a year of work experience under their belt can really tighten up their career path. Because oftentimes, if you're directly from undergrad, you might think that you know exactly what you want to do until you get there, and then you realize, oh, that's not all of what I was expecting. So the research component of going into looking at what these programs require is really important. And then again, if it does make sense for the person, if they're a little bit unclear about what their ultimate career goals are, getting some work experience can be really helpful.
Yeah. But I'd just like to emphasize that those who are coming directly out of undergrad are not at a disadvantage, because we're really looking at long-term potential. And so if you're coming out of undergraduate and you really know this is what you want to do, sure, go ahead. But if there's, you need some time. The other thing I would ask advisors is to highlight a little bit of what I said on the security clearances. Our society is changing. There are many places in the United States now where it's not illegal to use marijuana. It's still a federal crime, and so we do need to make sure that students understand that, because that can derail their application. And again, things are changing, but the U.S. government has not yet changed on that. So that would be something to make them aware of. Because the worst is if they get something and then they lose it because of something that has to do with their security.
We must have been so comprehensive that nobody had any questions.
Oh, okay. Please talk about the summer Rangel program for undergraduates.
So I have the honor and privilege to know many of the Rangel Summer Enrichment Scholars. For the last 2 years, I've been helping manage that program. And the program is a 6-week residential program that takes place during the summer for undergraduate students who are at least have sophomore standing at their institution and who are at some point between sophomore and senior status. We essentially support them in a 6-week program here at Howard. They take 2 classes, one on the history of U.S. foreign policy, another on global economics, and they also take an intensive writing seminar. And then we take them on a series of site visits and welcome panelists from around the city to come and speak with them about international affairs careers, running the gamut. Obviously, because it's a State Department funded program, we do put emphasis on the State Department, but we do also go to other internationally focused agencies like USAID, the CIA. We visit the Foreign Service Institute. We also visit a number of international NGOs and international organizations. I think this year we took them to the UN Foundation and Conics and a few others, just to give them a wide range of understanding of what careers look like in international affairs. The program is fully funded. We provide housing, a stipend for meals, and then an additional living stipend for the time that they're here, and we cover the cost of them coming to and from Washington, D.C. We are looking for students who are underrepresented in the Foreign Service, similar to the Rangel Graduate Fellowship program. Let's see what else is helpful. The cohort is 15, so we'll accept 15 students. It is a small cohort and it ends up building a really unique cohort dynamic for those students. The application will open in October and it'll close on February 5th of 2019, and the students will know by March whether or not they've been admitted to the program.
Yeah.
At least sophomore standing. They can also be graduating seniors as long as they're enrolled full-time in the spring semester at the time that they're applying to the program.
So I would say if you have a student who's really interested in international affairs, that maybe couldn't take advantage of all the opportunities, because as we know, international affairs loves a good unpaid internship, but not everybody can do that. Because this is fully funded, it allows them to come to DC and explore what they might want to do in a career in international affairs and be prepared. Besides the classwork, we spend a lot of time working on their professional skills. Those are speaking skills, writing skills, and giving them the knowledge they need. The last thing they do as part of the program is to give a presentation where they talk about what they've learned and also where they want to go. So it's a wonderful opportunity to take 6 weeks really thinking about what they want to do for the rest of their lives, which doesn't happen too often. And we don't lose them. We continue to stay in touch with them, and they're a wonderful resource. Okay, seeing none, I think that's a wrap up. Thank you so much to our speakers, so that's us. Thank you guys, and to all of you attending. Please plan to also join us on August 21st for an introductory look at the Payne Fellowship program. I'll be sure I can get the sound to work before then. Thank you, Carmen, so much for including us, and I hope everybody will look at these fellowships. They're wonderful opportunities for those of you who want to make a difference in the world. Thank you so much for spending some of your afternoon with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.